Hi there. Thanks to COVID-19, the summer of 2020 was shaping up to be pretty crappy. Mask wearing, social distancing, and Canada's closed border promised to put a cramp on all of our plans. But then we slowly began to figure out how to live with the situation and realized that there actually were pretty many things we could still do. It was about that time that Nancy Bormans and I discussed holding our Kick and Gliders meetings virtually. We also discussed the logistics of presenting our programs virtually as well. And I, foolishly, agreed not only to host the meetings, but to create and present our first program as well. That is why I began to document some of the summer activities Sandy and I undertook, as well as club activities that we participated in. I hope you enjoy the little video vignettes that follow. It was Jamie Hackman who organized a club bike ride in August on the Warwick to Ephrata Rail Trail. The group began their ride from the Warwick County Park end of the trail. Sandy and I joined the group for the 7.5-mile return ride, meeting them for lunch in Ephrata's Thomas P. Grader Community Park. One of the fun things along the trail is the Gnome Village in the backyard of the Akron home of a guy named Don Reese. Reese's project began as an easier alternative to removing a tree stump. Instead, he gave the stump a shingle roof, a front porch, and 3 gnomes. Noticing that trail riders and walkers seemed to enjoy his creation, he decided to expand the village with additional houses, other fanciful items, and holiday and seasonal displays. The village even has its own Facebook page, named after the occupant of the original stump house, Nibbles T. McGibbles, Esquire. In mid-September, Nancy Bormans organized another ride, this one on the Northwest River Trail along the Susquehanna River from Bainbridge to Columbia and return. It was a beautiful day for this 22-mile ride. This summer, we decided to treat Sandy's great-niece and nephew to a tour of the Wolf Sanctuary of Pennsylvania near Speedwell Forge. Sandy requested that our tour be guided by a fellow Armstrong retiree with whom she used to work. Russ's appearance has changed quite a bit from the button-down corporate type he used to be. Originally created about 40 years ago as a private rescue, the sanctuary has transformed into a 501c3 nonprofit organization and educational facility. There are more than 50 animals in the sanctuary, about half of which are full-bred gray wolves, while the rest are wolf-dog hybrids. Each pack is kept separated from other packs by its own fenced compound. We plan to visit again, this time for one of their full moon tours, said by some of our friends to be a really special time. There is, in the Susquehanna River, an amazing collection of potholes and sculpted boulders. The potholes lie just below 3 Mile Island and the Conewago Falls near the small town of Falmouth. They are considered one of the best displays of such phenomena in the entire country. Chris Brubaker organized a walk and paddle to visit this rock garden in late August, while the river level was quite low. The potholes are just a short walk north through the woods from the Falmouth boat launch off Route 441. Debris caught in trees along the walk illustrates that the river is not always this low. Looking northwest from the pothole area, you can see Conewago Falls in the distance. Also visible is the York Haven Hydroelectric Facility across the river along the west bank. The rocks in which the potholes were formed are all diabase, a super hard kind of igneous rock left in the area about 200 million years ago. Over thousands of years during the Ice Age, high flow rates at the Conewago Falls caused glacial sand to swirl in circles and create the potholes. The potholes can appear as perfectly round holes or as oblong or irregular troughs. There are also truck-sized boulders amid the rocky landscape. They were slid and rolled around about 750,000 years ago when a huge ice dam gave way that had blocked the west branch of the Susquehanna near what is now Williamsport. The wall of water that tossed them about was likely about 100 feet high as it raced through the area. Things haven't changed much since that time because no floods since then have come close to rearranging the rocks. Today, most of the debris carried down the Susquehanna is mud, not the sand that would be needed to further scour the potholes. Although Sandy and I did not join the rest of the group for the follow-up paddle through them, we enjoyed our walk among the potholes and the company of fellow club members.
We started this trip out of the Whispering Winds Campground in Sheffield, Pennsylvania. This is a private campground located in the north-central area of the Allegheny National Forest. Our first side trip was to Kinzua Bridge State Park. When completed in 1882, the Kinzua Bridge Viaduct was the highest railroad viaduct in the world. Built of cast iron, the original viaduct was approximately 300 feet high, a little over 2,000 feet long, and weighed a bit over 3 million pounds. In 1900, it was rebuilt in steel to replace the original cast iron structure. In later years, the bridge was used only by excursion trains. Then, in 2003, while it was undergoing restoration work, a tornado struck, causing 11 towers in the center of the bridge to collapse. By September 2011, 6 of the remaining towers had been restored to support a pedestrian walkway. The walkway leads to a 225-foot-high observation deck with a glass section in its middle. We walked the trail leading down to the valley floor to get a close-up view of the twisted ruins. The Allegheny National Forest was established in 1923. The land was so depleted from overforesting at that time that it was sometimes referred to as the Allegheny Brush Patch. There were some development fits and starts, but by the 1940s the forest began to look like it does today. Although the Forest Service resumed timber harvesting at about that time, there were still some 4,000 acres of protected, old-growth forest. The secluded Tionesta Scenic area is the home of some of that forest. It is the kind of forest that greeted early settlers to the area. Finding the place was a bit of a challenge due to the poorly mapped gravel roads that lead to it. Because it was late afternoon when we finally found it, we only got to walk the short loop trail. There were indeed lots of large trees. But we expected a canopy that would have shaded out most of the undergrowth. Instead, we were surprised at the density of saplings and shrubs that covered the forest floor. Inside the National Forest, and completed in 1965, Kinzua Dam impounds the Allegheny River to form Allegheny Reservoir, one of the largest dams east of the Mississippi. We drove to the Rimrock Overlook that provides views of the southern reaches of the lake. The impoundment serves as a flood control facility protecting Pittsburgh. We chose not to hike the trail to the bottom of the overlook. Near the southern end of the impoundment is the Kinzua Valley Trail, a bike trail we wanted to ride. The trail follows Kinzua Creek from near the end of the lake to the tiny hamlet of Westline. 5 miles long and mostly wooded, it is smooth-packed fine gravel and was a delight to ride. It turned out to be our favorite of several great trails we rode on this trip. A visit to Titusville has been on my bucket list since I was a kid. It was then that I learned that my middle name, Titus, also was the name of the place where the U.S. oil industry started. So we moved to Oil Creek Family Campground just south of town. Oil Creek flows between Titusville and Oil City to the south. Much of that section of the creek flows through Oil Creek State Park. And a wonderful paved bike trail that we wanted to ride, Oil Creek Trail parallels the creek through the park. Near the southern, Oil City end of the trail are tributes to the early days of the oil industry. A museum and monuments to the industry are at the Titusville end. We also rode the short Queen City extension into Titusville, where we indulged ourselves with ice cream treats at McDonald's. About half an hour south is another trail we wanted to bike, the Sandy Creek Trail, which parallels a creek by that name. We rode the eastern 5 miles of the trail, beginning at the Rockland Road trailhead and riding east to the Van trailhead. This was another paved trail almost entirely wooded and in beautiful condition. There were very few people on the trail, but we were hardly alone. We encountered the same herd of grazing deer on our way east and again on our return. On our way home, we stopped at Cook Forest State Park. We wanted to hike some of the network of trails in the Forest Cathedral Natural area of the park to see a bit of this forest for ourselves. John Cook arrived in the area in 1826, purchased 765 acres, and settled there with his wife and 10 children. He built a sawmill and developed a profitable timber business. In 1858, his son Andrew transformed the land into a thriving community whose main export was timber. The Cook Forest Association was formed in 1920 in the hopes of maintaining a portion of the forest's natural beauty. Finally, in 1927, the state purchased about 6,000 acres, making Cook Forest the first Pennsylvania state park acquired to preserve a natural landmark. Also known as the Land of Giants, this area is home to some of the tallest tree species in the northeastern United States, including some virgin white pine trees that are over 300 years old and over 200 feet high. In fact, some of the old-growth timber from the era of William Penn himself remains standing today. Nan Reisinger originated this next trip. She proposed a mid-October camping trip to Hickory Run State Park, and about a dozen club members agreed to join her there. As it turned out, we were fortunate in that the weather was perfect, and our visit happened to fall during peak leaf color in the park. Hickory Run's proximity to the Lehigh Gorge State Park, with its bike trail through the gorge, was one of the attractions for this trip. On our first full day there, Nan, Sandy, and I biked the northern section of that trail between Whitehaven and Rockport. We began at the Tannery Road trailhead, heading first north about a mile north of Whitehaven, then south to Rockport, and finally returning to our starting point. This trail is part of the 165-mile-long D&L Trail that follows the Lehigh and Delaware rivers, extending from Mountaintop in the north to Bristol in the south. The section we rode follows the railroad corridor built after the northern extension of the Lehigh Canal was wiped out by a major flood in June of 1862. This section of the Lehigh is also popular for whitewater rafting, and we passed put-ins and takeouts along the way. Although the water level was low during our bike ride, dam releases scheduled during the weekends make this a very popular activity. We checked out one of the put-ins. Also, some intact ruins of a couple of canal locks remain along this section of the trail and were a worthwhile diversion during our ride. Locks 24 and 22 were part of a series of 29 locks that raised northbound barges 600 feet over a distance of just 5.5 miles. The locks in this section of this 60-foot wide, 5-foot deep canal were revolutionary in that they filled or emptied in just 3 minutes on a 30-foot high lock. There were several waterfalls along our route as well. Buttermilk Falls, pictured here, was the largest that we stopped to see. Also, this unnamed waterfall gave me a chance to play a bit with my camera's shutter speed. We started our second day by driving to Hickory Run's famous boulder field. The boulder field is striking because of its flatness and absence of vegetation over the large area of 400 feet by 1,800 feet. Many people assume the 16-acre flat field of boulders was deposited by a glacier. However, we know that the glacier stopped about a mile north of the field. Geologists believe that the combination of freeze-thaw, geliflection, and frost heave created this natural wonder at least 20,000 years ago. Leaving the boulder field, our entire group drove to Hawk Falls trailhead. From there, we walked a short trail to the base of the falls, and some took the side trail for the view from the top of the falls on their way out. Hawk Falls is a 25-foot tall waterfall along Hawk Run in the southeast corner of the park. True to his past, Bart Richwine couldn't resist posing at the top of the falls. The pose was a reflection of his starring role on the frozen waterfall at the head of Cascade Lake, while cross-country skiing on the 2010 inlet trip. Afterward, while the rest of the group hiked the trail back up to the boulder field, Gary Musser, Sandy, and I wanted to walk the Shades of Death Trail. The trail is regarded as the most picturesque trail in the park. Near the upper end of the trail is the Saylorsville Dam. The curtain-style cascade flowing over the dam is beautiful. But the original dam failed on October 30th, 1849. Sadly, many people were killed by that failure, and several sawmills and homes were destroyed. Although the trail has a gruesome name, it is simply named after the thick forests and rough terrain that it runs through. Ruins of some of the old logging mills and dams, which date back to the early 1800s, are visible along this trail. We camped for several days near Ocean Pines, Maryland, so Sandy could swat away at a little yellow ball while she attended a pickleball coaching camp. It happens that our friends and ex-Kick and Gliders, Steve and Lori Schwab, live not far away from Ocean Pines near Bethany Beach, Delaware. So Steve and I arranged to take a bike ride together on our first full day in the area. Our route followed a 20-mile loop using an almost continuous series of bike trails that combine Delaware's Gordon's Pond Trail with Lou's Junction and Breakwater Trail. We picked up the trail from the parking lot in Gordon's Pond State Park. It started by winding around the pond for which the park is named. The trail then traversed a large marshy area on an elegant aluminum decked boardwalk. Here we stopped to gaze over the ocean from the Walking Dune Trail parking area. There are an abundance of abandoned World War II buildings in the park. A short detour took us out Dune Road through the old barracks and gun emplacements in the Fort Miles historical area. Transitioning to the Junction and Breakwater Trail, we followed it into Lou's. There we stopped in the small canal-side 1812 Memorial Park and watched fishermen make a number of catches from the dock while we ate our lunches. Continuing along the Junction and Breakwater Trail, we rode through and around several upscale housing developments. Back into the woods and along farm fields, we followed the trail to its end, just a block from, can you believe it, Revelation Craft Brewing. Well, no way were we going to pass up a brew pub without sampling its product. Their Conan the Juice Man was just my type. Afterwards, we rode the last couple of miles through a lovely, old-style Rehoboth neighborhood to return to our starting point. It was a perfect way to share a day of socially distanced friendship. On our last, lightly raining afternoon in the area, Sandy and I decided to take a driving tour of the northern section of Assateague Island National Seashore. Besides exploring the park and its facilities, we were on the lookout for some of the wild ponies that inhabit the island. We did spot a small group grazing at the point just beyond the campground. However, the big catch was the pony jam we encountered just as we were about to drive off the island. Ponies were grazing right beside the road. One mare even paused to nurse her colt as she crossed the road right in front of us. Cool.
So it really is possible to have some fun and some just enjoyable times, even in the midst of a pandemic like we're living through right now. I hope you enjoyed. Have a great evening.